This episode is brought to you by Namely. We've all heard the news. The Great Resignation is affecting so many businesses, and let's face it, keeping employees engaged and connected is crucial to avoid high turnover and its even higher cost. That's why I think you should check out Namely, the all-in-one HR solution that offers everything you need to hire, inspire, and retain your workforce, which, as you all know, is something that I am extremely passionate about. So you can say goodbye to the Great Resignation and hello to the Great Re-engagement. Whether you have 50 or 1,000 employees, Namely is going to help you maintain a great experience for the entire employee lifecycle, with onboarding, performance management, and intuitive benefits enrollment all on one connected platform. Plus, Namely can also streamline your payroll, time tracking, and vacation requests, and help make you everyone's favorite HR leader. Companies are built on people, so don't let either fall. Learn more about making the switch to Namely, and for a limited time, get your first month free when you make the switch. Go to namely.com today. Don't wait. That's Namely, Namely.com. You'll be glad you did.
We've entered a new era of what I call transparency, accountability, and responsibility, where the customer, your favorite segment, Blake, the customer who is always has been at the center and should be at the center of any business operation, is now asking and expecting, as almost table stakes, that you as a company will be accountable for your behavior, you will be responsible in your presence, and you will be contributory towards the greater good in some way, shape, or form.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Be Your Own Boss podcast. I'm Blake Morgan here with Jacob Morgan. Today, our very special guest is Walter Robb, the former co-CEO of Whole Foods Market. Walter is the principal of Stonewall Advisors, and today we're talking about how to turn your passion into a sustainable business. Walter, welcome.
Thanks so much, Blake and Jacob. And are you guys connected in some way? I think so, right?
Husband, wife.
Yeah.
And fun fact for those people.
Fun fact.
Oh, no, sorry. Go ahead, Walter.
Fun fact. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. The fun fact was that I worked at Whole Foods many, many years ago. So a lot of people probably don't know that, but it was one of my favorite jobs that I've ever had. And I worked as a grocery clerk. I worked in the dairy cooler. I worked in the freezer, and I had a lot of fun there before I went to college.
That's so good to hear. That was what we were all trying to do together, is have fun and sell groceries. So it's good that we're here today. Thank you for inviting me to come back to the show again, Blake. Appreciate it.
I am so happy you're here. And every time we go back to that Whole Foods where Jacob worked in Woodland Hills, California, there's a picture on the wall of the original team in Austin. And honestly, I think you must be in that picture.
Well, actually, I am not in that particular picture, but I know that picture you're speaking of. It looks like from a bygone era, because everybody had facial hair and sort of no shoes, and that's the way it was back then. That's long before your time, though, Blake and Jacob. That's
it's all
long before
coming
your
back.
time.
It's all back now. Like, his brother has a man bun, so if you see a guy with a man bun shopping at Woodland Hills Whole Foods Market, that is
probably
his
my
little brother.
Well, when I see him driving a VW Beetle, then I'll know for sure that we're back in time. So okay.
Yeah, amazing.
All right.
So you were so early predicting this huge trend that the entire world would be interested in sustainable food, in good food, in whole food. You really had this grocery store back in the 80s, and in early 1990s, it was acquired by Whole Foods, and it turned into the 12th Whole Foods Market ever. And then you ended up becoming the co-CEO with John Mackey. Oh my God, what a story. So take us back to 1978, to the time where you have this grocery store, and how you became what you are now.
Well, you're very kind to say all that, and obviously it was a tremendous team effort across the board, including Jacob's work as well, that got us to the place where we got to. But well, no, I mean, it was seriously. I mean, Jacob
Tell
knows
Whole Foods to send me the check for my equity
exactly.
of building the
Well, your sweat equity's in the thing that got built, and that is in the people more than anything else. But it seriously was a team effort. But thanks for reminding everyone how old I am, Blake, because I did start my first store in 1978, and I think it kind of goes to what I think you want to talk about today is just around the passion, and I think that that's such an individual journey for every person, particularly every young person, because they come out with pressures on them from their parents or from family or from friends about what they think they should do or ought to do, and really what the journey is around finding your own passion truly inside yourself and being able to listen for that first and then trust that and follow it, like you've done here creating your podcast series. There's no substitute for ultimately you finding that inside yourself, because you'll never be satisfied until you actually pursue that which is inside of you. If you're pursuing somebody else's passion, or you're pursuing what somebody else told you to be your passion and it's not yours, this is why you find people have midlife crisis or crisis later in their life, because they say, hey, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to do this. And they finally let themselves free to pursue that. So the first thing I'd say really is around, and that would happen for me, was I felt the spark around reading Adele Davis and Francis Moore Lapay, and started making my own bread. And I don't know, the pieces just sort of came together. Say, wow, this could be a cool thing to do, and I wanted to contribute to the world. And so, I stitched it together with band-aids and paper clips, and borrowed a little bit of money and started a little store in 1978. Which, as you say, I ran that, and I ended up selling my store to John in 91, which was store number 12 for Whole Foods. And so, but it all started with a gut instinct, a gut trust of saying, well, this feels like something I want to follow. And it's not like, Moses comes down and gives everybody the tablets and says, here, this is what you're supposed to do with your life. The whole point of it is you have to discover that inside yourself, and and no one else can do that for you. And so, it's just like, and obviously the entrepreneurs that are part of your series are already on that journey. They've already found enough trust to start something. It's not an easy journey. It's a lot easier to go to work for somebody else and let them figure all that out. But it's deeply satisfying when you do take the time to find your passion, trust it, and then start to give it expression. And I think for me, the great thing to finish up here has been that really the honor and of serving as part of the Whole Foods team and being part of it to build it from the beginning is really around this idea of finding your purpose in life early, and the joy that comes from living a life where you're doing what you really feel like you're supposed to do. And that's really the idea here, is to live a life that's meaningful. So that's how kind of it all happened. And it was not I didn't predict anything. All I did was try to meet the moment in time where I said, okay, what do I want to do? And it ended up being a store. And then who ever knew that it would go from that single little store that was an old auto garage into what you see today. There's no way you would have known that. But so that was kind of a long answer, but there you have it.
So, do you think all people should follow their passion?
I think all people should explore. I think all people should use their consciousness and awareness to ask themselves what they're truly doing here. What is the purpose of their life? What is the reason that they're here, and how do they want to use their time? Now, different people want to go to different levels with that question. The thing is, the question is always there. It's like a dashboard of your life, and you can go there anytime you want, because it's a relevant question at any moment of your life, right? I mean, you could ask yourself that now or 5 years from now, and it still works. So it's up to the individual to decide. I happen to know that for me, that sense of purpose comes from, it wells up inside. I can't help it. I have to follow it. I don't have a choice, or I make that choice. And other people may say, I'm going to put my life together differently, or these are different things. And so there's no judgment about it. But I would say from my experience that for entrepreneurs, and particularly learning to trust themselves, knowing that they'll make mistakes, knowing it won't be a straight road, but trying to build their confidence in that inner light, that light inside themselves that they trusted in the first place, is really what's really key to a successful journey.
Can I ask one follow-up question?
Yeah, go for it.
So, speaking of passion, I know that earlier on, for example, I know Blake was never passionate about customer experience earlier on in her career. I was never passionate about the future of work or leadership. We weren't passionate podcasters. This is all stuff that sort of came later on. So I'm always really curious on that question because there's a lot of debate on if you should follow your passion and try to turn it into a business, or if following your passion is actually bad advice. So I'm curious to hear your take on it because I think for both of us, I don't know. Would you say you followed your passion, Blake?
No, I followed what the market wanted to hear from me because there was this lack of information about something that I
Yeah.
knew about. But I wouldn't say I followed my passion.
But you brought, I think you brought your.
I brought my.
Yeah,
passion,
we both brought our passion to what we do because Blake is passionate about a lot of different topics. Women's issues, entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm.
I'm passionate about like chess. So I try to incorporate that stuff into a lot of the work that I do. So it's kind of a debate, and I'm curious to hear your perspectives on that. Do you follow your passion, or is it better to bring your passion with you to whatever it is that you're doing?
Well, of course, it's not an either or, and I suspect if you were to look underneath the chess and underneath the podcast, you'd find a deeper thread that connects all your activities. I mean, Schopenhauer, the philosopher, said that life makes a lot more sense looked at backwards than forwards. But I suspect if you were to dig down, or anyone to dig down, they would find the connecting threads between the activities that may be a different way of expressing your particular gifts. So if you don't like the word passion, substitute your interest, or substitute your gifts, or what is it that you're good at? What is it that you've been given? What tools do you have? And also, it's dynamic. I mean, it continues to evolve and change and iterate. So what might be true when I was 20, 20 or 21, maybe there's a different set of circumstances. And remember, everybody grows up in different circumstances that affect their ability to make choices, right? What community they live in, what their ethnicity is, what their particular cultural conditions are. All those things affect the choices that people are able to make and the range of choices they can make. So you got to leave the judgment behind. You got to look for the connecting threads. You got to ultimately learn to. I'm just saying, if you don't feel passionate about what you're doing, then you should at least ask yourself, why am I doing something that I don't feel excited about? And is that my only choice? Now, it might be in a particular time in your life. In fact, that's what you have to do because you have to take care of business. You have to take care of your family or whatever. But it's at least worth asking yourself, if you're going to spend time on something, or you're going to spend time with someone, and you're not excited about it, why would you do it? Or why wouldn't you start looking for something else? I learned something from John. The question when you approach a decision point in your life, the question that I learned from him was like, well, pick the one that you're most excited about. You could substitute the word excitement for passion and say, what are you excited about? I find even now that I have the muscle tuned up a little bit, but as we go through the stream of life, call it the Morse code of life, whatever you want, I look for those moments when I feel a spark, where something about a movie clip or a piece of music or a spoken word. I think we all remember the poet laureate, or the poet that was at the inauguration this year, and when she spoke, how that felt. And you look for those felt moments that tell you there's a connection between that and you as a person. And you ask yourself, well, what does that mean? So you can actually break it down to a lower level and think about it that way.
I love all these references from poetry and music and art. And I have to say, you did not do this in our podcast. So I feel like Jacob must be really channeling this for something.
I think it's being on Zencaster that's making all the difference today.
Yeah.
It's made you zen being on Zen.
No, it's kind of nice talking to you too. It's kind of nice talking to the two of you. Like we're in a living room just doing a visit, talking about, how we live our lives. And, we're different. So I'm a graybeard now, and you guys are still young and in your prime. So we have that difference there too I've had a few more years to think about these sorts of things. But honestly, who are you working with? What are you working on? And where are you doing it? Kind of the three basic questions that I think people should ask themselves. And the thing about it is, it's a choice that every individual gets to make. They don't have to do that. If they don't have to ask those questions, they can just go on if they want. But all great entrepreneurs, of course, do ask that and say, where can I plug in? Where can I bring my gifts? Where can I contribute? Where can I do something that hasn't been done before? Which is the essence of entrepreneurship stuff. And for me, that is the values. I like to imagine and create things that don't exist right now. That's what really the thing. When I think back on my career, the real moments of joy, the greatest moments of joy at Whole Foods have been those times where we actually went out and did something that hadn't been done before. I'll give you an example. Was for me particularly was building the supermarket in inner city Detroit, which was the first supermarket since the 50s in inner city Detroit. It was everybody said it was a crazy idea, but it was very exciting for the company to step into a situation no one expected them to step into, and the team members loved it, and end up being a very successful store, even though you wouldn't have given it good odds on the front end. So we took ourselves as a company, as a primarily white company, into a primarily black community, and we're able to, find a common ground and extend and open the store and made our company richer as a result of that step. So no risk, no reward. And that's, I think, what entrepreneurs know instinctively is the power of taking that risk, of having the courage to take a step and to trust, even when everybody around you says that's a stupid idea.
Do you have a process, speaking of risk, Walter, that you take yourself through? Because I'm loving hearing you talk, that you listen to art and you watch film and you're always looking for those moments and inspiration. But then, of course, there's the moment of, okay, I want to do this thing. I want to create this whole trade program like you did. What is the process of looking at the risks and then deciding if you're going to move forward despite?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was obviously a collective effort. We were trying to figure out how did we speak to the fair trade customer. When fair trade obviously started at the same time in the 70s, and so we wanted to be able to give ourselves. And the fair trade program has a limitation in that the product can only come from co-ops. And so the problem that we were trying to solve was, well, how do we extend that offer and have it not just be restricted to co-ops, but all other producers that we think are responsible in the developing world? And out of that conversation, with the other members of the executive team, came the whole trade solution. So in some ways, that was in business is a very much the most powerful force for good on the planet. And it is a constant set of problem solving that you're doing every day with situations that present themselves, whether it's from competition or whether it's from your desire to iterate, which, of course, Jacob, we tried to do something new with every new store to continue to push the company forward. And I do pride myself on being a very pushy leader, pushy with a heart. I try to say push, 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 because you got to keep going, but also you got to do it in a caring way and in an inclusive way. But that's how I would describe myself as a leader: pushing but caring, I guess. But I think the whole trade thing really came out of the desire to want to broaden the offering from anyone that was willing to produce responsibly in our supply chain, and bring those choices as a wider set of choices to the market, and also to do it under our name, which frankly people knew our name a little bit more than they knew fair trade, but whole trade was something we created to be able to put it under the Whole Foods banner and extend those choices to give them to the customer. So it was a systematic thinking around how to meet a challenge that was presented, working it through, using the power of the group to hone and test and think and polish it to a better shape before we brought it out in the form of the whole trade line, which you've seen today. And by the way, we tacked on a 1% feature to it, which means 100% of that stream of revenue goes to support the Whole Planet Foundation, which cycles back loans back into the developing communities from whence the product came. So all that iterated during the process of creating the whole trade label. But think about how we improved it even at the end by putting the give back component to the label, so the customers know that with their purchase, they are supporting the communities that actually produce the product in the developing world.
This episode is brought to you by Namely. We've all heard the news. The Great Resignation is affecting so many businesses, and keeping employees engaged and connected is crucial to avoid high turnover. That's why you should check out Namely.com, the all-in-one HR solution. Whether you have 50 employees or 1,000 employees, Namely will help you maintain a great experience for the entire employee lifecycle, with onboarding, performance, payroll, benefits administration, and compliance, all on one intuitive platform. If you want to become everyone's favorite HR leader, then check out Namely.com today. And for a limited time, you will get your first month free when you make the switch. Go to Namely.com namely.com. That's namely.com. What happens when your passion and profit are not aligned? So maybe you're passionate about something, but it's not making money, or you're passionate about something, but the ability to make money is not, you have to do something that is outside of your passion to be able to make that money. How do you balance those two when they're not on the same side?
Well, making money for me and for many others at Whole Foods is not the goal in and of itself. It's a byproduct of doing good work. And so, so Whole Foods was set up, as you know, Jacob, to bring healthier food to the world. That was the reason the company existed. And yes, money's involved because you have to raise money to build the company and do the things you have to do. But it wasn't the reason the company existed. The money came as a result of the good work that was being done. That we were rewarded by the capital markets for continuing to do a good job. But that being said, being and particularly as a public company, I can tell you there are times where there's a tension between being a shareholder owned company and being a for-purpose company. There are some tensions that arise, and so um, when you have to show up every quarter and report your results to the street, that they want to hold you accountable every quarter, when you know perfectly well, anybody would know you can't build anything enduring from a quarter to quarter perspective. You got to think longer term than that. So there's a certain inherent tension, particularly as a public company, that every CEO and team has to wrestle with. And I would say that, look, the shareholder stakeholder deserves their fair return, but they don't deserve to dominate the purpose of the company. They are one of the stakeholders in the company, of the success of the company. So, you acknowledge that you try to take care of them by performing. If you perform and the company grows successfully, the stockholder is very happy, and they're pretty much happy with the return of it. The tension comes that, let's say as you saw in the last year of our life as a public company, where we missed a couple of quarters and our growth slowed. They were not happy with the performance. They dropped the stock, and then as a result, we had activists come in, and kind of how that all turned out. So that's an extreme example of the tension between the two, But I think you just if you don't give always purpose the upper hand as a path to profit, because I don't see without the profits you can't do your work, right. You need the money to pay for the thing, but I think you always keep your North Star in mind, and you always recognize that to do that successfully, you have to be a profitable enterprise to be able to continue to grow, pay your team members, pay your suppliers, et cetera. So they're not inconsistent, but it's the way you put them together and the way you hold them together that makes the difference.
And same thing for entrepreneurs, I'm assuming.
Yeah, well, entrepreneurs, I was talking to one the other day. He was talking about the beginning and how they had no money. One of the things you asked me was about, what's the advice in that. Of course, it's been a few years since I was the wolf was at my door, but the being scrappy, being really scrappy, and this entrepreneur that had three co-founders told me that they were at a single bed at a motel, and they would weave the sheet between the three on one bed, and they'd use one sheet because they'd save the money by just getting a one bedroom hotel room and weave the sheet like that, so they could stretch the buck. So I think that was I'd never heard that one before, but that's pretty scrappy. But in terms of entrepreneurs, like, yeah, I mean, you've got to make the dollar stretch, and you've got to put the dollar in the right place. But sometimes another story I heard was this entrepreneur had to choose between paying the team or paying the insurance on the delivery vehicles, and so he chose to pay the team and not the delivery vehicle. So he didn't have insurance. So he took a risk because he only had so many resources at that time. Now he made it through but those are tough choices to make. Unfortunately, as an entrepreneur, generally when you're starting out, you have to make those sorts of choices and decisions all the time. So, look, there's no right answer to that. It's just that you recognize if you're not in business, if you don't do whatever it takes to stay in business that's ethical, you won't be in business and won't make a difference. So if you're not paying attention to the fact of the money and some profit, you'll be out of business. And if you want to be a nonprofit, most nonprofits are constantly out asking for money and haven't figured out how to sustain themselves without asking for money. So it's always a question you have to be thinking about. it just shouldn't be the dominant question when it comes to why a company exists, in my view.
So when I think about Whole Foods, Walter, and now I look at the entire world and the retail experience now, Whole Foods didn't just impact how we eat and groceries. Every single company now has a environmental, social, sustainability piece of what they do. It's their biggest piece of marketing today. It's everywhere. So it's interesting. It's interesting to think about how it's not just a food trend that you created or a shopping trend. It's literally now capitalism. It's about what are you doing for society. That is really the rallying cry of every marketer right now.
That's right. We've entered a new era of what I call transparency, accountability, and responsibility, where the customer, your favorite segment, Blake, the customer who is always has been at the center and should be at the center of any business operation is now asking and expecting as almost table stakes that you as a company will be accountable for your behavior, you will be responsible in your presence, and you will be contributory towards the greater good in some way, shape, or form. Now, what you're seeing is a lot of companies stretch awkwardly in directions that make no sense or look inauthentic. But you're also seeing a lot of companies that are doing right and generally trying to increase their diversity and inclusion or contribute to the communities they serve or take care of their health, take care of their team members better than they had previously, kind of a woke moment, if you will. So I do think that the customer of today,
Hmm.
these generations have a much higher expectation of how a company will show up before they will reward them with their business. And I think that's great because, it is going to take business and all of business to create the changes we need to create a more sustainable future. Can't get there on government alone by any means. We need the business community to lead and to set examples and to put it into practice. And so, them embracing these ideas of transparency, accountability, and responsibility is critical to getting there. And so, each company has to figure out
Well,
what's the right way for them to do that. So,
maybe one more question for you, Walter. I know you also do a lot of investing. So Blake and I are also very curious. What do you look for in entrepreneurs that you want to invest in? And maybe you can look at it from two sides. What do you look for in the entrepreneurs themselves as people? And what do you look for from a business perspective to decide if you want to invest in the business?
yeah, those are the right questions. I mean, the first one is does the idea itself make any sense to me? First of all, I a lot of times I get ideas in areas that I don't have so-called domain expertise. My background. I'm a retailer all my life and stuff, and so the food. I understand retail and food pretty well. No one has to explain the proposition to me, but I do invest in some other businesses that come to me that I have an interest in, but I'm still learning. And in that case, I rely more on other folks or other parties who I know and trust, and say this is a good thing to do. And so in that case, that becomes more of a factor. But if I take the food and retail, for example, does this idea make sense to me? Do I see it? So here's an example of one I recently invested in. Is called Foxtrot, which is a newly imagined. They're digital natives now gone physical as well. It's a new imagined neighborhood convenience store. Um, and if you look, it's kind of an interesting. It's not. It's kind of a mixture of Starbucks meets a wine shop meets a local grocery sort of combination. A small 2,500 square foot store. Well, I thought to myself, okay, we know that Whole Foods is out there. We know Amazon's out there. We know Walmart's out there. But this, you could actually see that people have rediscovered their neighborhoods. They're at home more. They like a nice local gathering. This makes sense to me. This makes sense in terms of something that would fit out there. Okay, and then do I like the entrepreneur? Yes, I think Mike Labitola, who's the founder and CEO, is terrific. He's got a confidence about him and determination about him that I think that's really cool. And also, he's able to attract talent, which tells you a lot that about a CEO who's willing to go out and hire really talented people. Be able A, that he can attract them, but B, that they would trust and give up a proven career to come over for a startup. So all those are sort of factors in that particular case. But it does come down. Do you think that does the proposition make sense? Can you see yourself being a customer of it? Do you understand why that makes sense? And second of all, do you think the leader has what it takes to pull it off, or are they not quite there yet? So So the old question that the old people say is this a business or it is an idea? You've heard Mr. Wonderful say that on what's that show called? You know that show what I'm talking about, Mr.
Shark
Shark
Wonderful.
Tank.
Tank.
Shark Tank. He'll say, this is not a business. This is an idea. So first of all, do we have a business here that we can believe? And then second of all, do we have a person who we think has the stick-to-itness, the scrappiness, and the confidence to be able to take it along, and enough of a low ego to be willing to bring the type of talent you need to grow a truly great company.
Wonderful. That's great. I want to check out that Foxtrot. I'm going to dance Foxtrot myself into that store.
And maybe you can take
we have a rapid fire round.
Well, I was going to say you could talk Jacob into
Say it again.
You can have Jacob take you do Foxtrot with you.
Yeah. Gonna have him dance me into that store and get
Maybe.
some wine. All right, really quick rapid fire round. I know you're a busy guy, but we have to know. This is the fun part. Are you ready to answer a few very quick questions?
Of course.
All right, Walter. If you could bring only one food and one drink on an island, what would they be?
The one food would be apricots, and the one drink would be water. Boring.
What was your most embarrassing moment at work?
Most embarrassing moment at work was, gosh darn, that's a tough one. Let's see. Most embarrassing moment really was a moment that I messed up with one of my fellow executive team members. The details don't matter for the purpose of this, but I did something I shouldn't have done, and it was very embarrassing, and it was apparent to all, mostly to me. And so that moment obviously sticks out as something that was embarrassing. You know, when you get found out, when you like,
What's your greatest?
when you blow it, it's not so cool, you know.
Yeah, we make a lot of mistakes. Yeah. What's your greatest joy?
As I told you earlier, it's imagining and creating.
If you could have lunch with one person, alive or dead, who would it be?
It would be either Albert Schweitzer or Abraham Lincoln. So Albert Schweitzer, my hero growing up, Nobel Peace Prize winner in 1963, author of Reverence for Life, or Abraham Lincoln, who I think has been who's just an amazing president, but an amazing life story, and I love reading his letters and his speeches and that sort of thing. So one of those two would probably be my first pick.
All right. And then, wait, one last question. I have to ask about the band. Greatest band of all time.
Tower of Power. Tower of Power. East Bay funk band.
Like
it's been together over 50 years. In fact, played at my wedding.
Wow.
Oh,
very
that's
cool.
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Walter, thank you so much for taking the time with us today. If people want to learn more about you, where can they reach you?
Well, they can reach me through you, Blake, since they should support your
Okay.
podcast, or they can check out a little website I have, just stonewallrob.com.
All right. Well, thank you. It's been such a pleasure. We love talking to you. All of you have been tuning in and watching the Be Your Own Boss podcast. Until next time.
Thanks again for tuning into the show, and don't forget to go to 6leadershiptrends.com to grab a copy of my brand new PDF, which is going to walk you through the 6 trends that are shaping leadership and what it means to be a leader. And it will also give you action items for what you should be doing for each one of these 6 trends to adapt and evolve so that you can be a better leader in the future of work. Again, that is 6leadershiptrends.com. You can either spell out the number 6 in the URL or just use the number 6 in the URL. They will both take you to the same place. Thanks again for tuning in.